How will the Minnesota Wild fill Matt Boldy's shoes with him week to week? In the short term, sounds like we're going to get an 11-7 against Montreal tonight. In the long term, we've got some thoughts we'll discuss on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duhaime, and this is Locked on Wild.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any of our episodes throughout the week, as well as our in-game coverage as the Minnesota Wild continue their season. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we discuss what Matt Boldy's absence will mean for the Minnesota Wild, how they'll fill it for tonight's game, and what we can expect as the injury rolls on. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and as we learned yesterday from general manager Bill Guerin, Matt Boldy's week to week, but just like with Jared Spurgeon's injury, it's not expected that he is going to need to go on long-term injured reserve. And so now you are down 2 spots in the lineup, and you are playing with razor thin margins for this team. So for the short term, for tonight's game against the Montreal Canadiens, it sounds as though we're going to get an 11-7. But as Michael Russo noted, doesn't sound like we're going to see any defensemen suiting up to play a wing position on offense. And it sounds as though the majority of the way that this is going to be handled is by Kirill Kaprizov getting an opportunity to get some additional minutes to kind of get him up to speed at the start of this season, which against a team like Montreal is probably fine. I mean, I think the lineup is going to obviously take a hit without Matt Boldy, but if you're filling a lot of that void with Kirill Kaprizov, that's not a bad plan. Although I'm not sure that I like that with a game on Thursday and then a game on Saturday and then a game on Tuesday. But it is early in the season, and so everybody's still kind of getting up to game speed, so to speak, as things roll on. The other interesting thing that we learned from practice yesterday was some of the line combinations that we saw on defense. Dean Evason alluded to this after the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, that the Wild were likely going to make a few changes to their blue line, just trying to get more consistent performance from everybody up and down that lineup. And what we saw at practice was the following combinations. We saw Jonas Brodin with Calen Addison, Jake Middleton with Brock Faber, and then we saw the combination of John Merrill, Alex Goligoski, and Dakota Mermis. And so, again, we're seeing a little bit of a shuffle in the top 4 to try to get everybody going, to try to, I think, give Calen Addison some better partner play in his pairing. And honestly, you look at what happened in the game against Toronto, and I know I had alluded to the 3 defensemen that were just not great in Middleton, Goligoski, and Merrill, and I didn't notice anything particularly glaring about Calen Addison's performance. Obviously, the defense as a whole was not great in that game. And so you are doing Addison the opportunity to play next to Jonas Brodin, if these are the pairings that they go with, you're doing Addison the opportunity to play next to Jonas Brodin. And Brodin has certainly had plenty of experience playing with a defenseman partner who is not super inclined defensively. And then with the fact that Brock Faber is essentially Jared Spurgeon light, you're trying to replicate that magic between Middleton and Spurgeon by having Brock Faber matched up with him. And that should hopefully help kind of smooth out this top four. But once again, we still have some issues on that third pairing. And so with the fact that the team's going to go 11-7, let's talk about something that we absolutely should see in this one. I think you got to go with the take shifts away approach for both guys on the third pairing. If they do something out on the ice that is not contributing to this team beating the Montreal Canadiens, Dakota Mermis is there. Give him an opportunity to slide in. If you're not going to do anything to, assist the offense with having those 7 defensemen dress, then you just got to start taking shifts away from people. If they're not going to be out there, making winning plays, committing penalties, those sorts of things. And so if you want to have that be the pairing to start, that's your choice, I guess. But if things happen during the game that don't work out well, Mermis has got to get in. And honestly, I would rather Mermis start for sure than to come off the bench. But if that is kind of how this is going to play out, and then you minimize the impact of that third pairing by playing those top 2 pairings more minutes together, that's one way to deal with it. If it gets to where that third pairing just continues to be a sieve, then you may have to mix these combinations up a little more, and you may have to pair one of those guys with Jonas Brodin to allow for maximum help out there on the ice. But regardless, we're seeing a shuffle of the deck. And in game 3 of the season, after the performance that we saw against Toronto, and with being on the road, with the 0 funds to do much of anything, that's about all you can ask for, is the coaching staff saying, yeah, let's mix these up a little bit. But got to keep an eye on that third pairing. If things continue to trend poorly for that group, then you are going to have to try to find a way to better help those 2 specifically to try to get by here. And so it's a work in progress to see how these combinations are going to play out. But I would love nothing more than to see a nice amount of minutes from Dakota Mermis here, spelling Merrill, spelling Goligoski, spelling both, depending on how things are going. Just use him as a utility defenseman to fill in for whoever he needs to for this game at least, and then you'll kind of have to wait and see. As far as replacing Matt Boldy in the lineup, as we discussed, it sounds as though Kirill Kaprizov is going to get some double shifts to try to get him going, but there are certainly other candidates who are worthy of getting a little extra ice time. And so we'll discuss a few names who should also get looks in tonight's game on that Eriksson Ek and Johansson line. We'll discuss all that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and with the NHL season in full swing, there is nothing that is more stressful than trying to buy tickets to see your favorite team in action the day of the event. You can never find good deals on tickets. Plus, half the time you buy your tickets and you show up and you're sitting behind some sort of obstruction, whether it be a pillar in the arena or other things along that line. Well, Game Time is here to help simplify the process and find you great deals on last-minute tickets. They make the buying process so easy, and you can find tickets for every kind of event in your area, plus those all-important views from all seats in the venue. Game Time also offers their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Our next sponsor has a product that I use on an everyday basis, and that is AG1. And really for me, I wanted to try to simplify my vitamin and supplement routine in the morning and try to find something that gave me a little better grasp of the day as I was heading out the door. It just was too complicated of a process to have 5 or 6 different supplements all at once, plus trying to find that great blend to give me an energy boost to start the day. AG1 simplifies all of that in just one scoop. You can get 75 high-quality ingredients that give me key daily nutrients and support energy, focus, strength, and clarity. No more crashing at my desk after lunch. I can get through the entire day with the boost of energy that AG1 provides. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Again, drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out today. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wilds. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wilds your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, make sure that you stick with us through tonight's game with our in-game content featuring intermission reports as well as our live Locked on Wild postcast, where we'll get your reaction to whatever may happen against the Montreal Canadiens here this evening. So it sounds as though Kirill Kaprizov is going to get some additional minutes, which that's fine. That's a perfectly acceptable way to try to replace Matt Boldy in the lineup. But Kaprizov's not the only worthy candidates to get an additional uptick in minutes. Through 2 games of the season, we have seen a few players that have really been impressing so far. Obviously, first and foremost, Rossi has looked really, really good through the first 2 games of the season. And with what he brings to the table, his ability, his shot confidence for one, I think would be a great benefit to the Eriksson Ek and Johansson pairing. Now, obviously, with Rossi being a center, you are taking him off the board in those instances. But let's not forget, you've got Freddie Gaudreau, who is a capable wing/center on that third pairing. And, you know, he can take faceoffs if needed. It gives you some flexibility lower in the lineup if you do want to elevate somebody to get some additional shifts. If you give Kaprizov a couple of double shifts, maybe you give Rossi 1 or 2 as well, just to see if he is able to handle that here in the third game of the season. So Rossi is one, always going to campaign for more ice time for Brandon Duhaime. We know what Duhaime brings to the table. He is a fierce puck battler along the boards. He brings great speed to the table, but as we saw in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, he has the ability to pull some very, very amazing goals out of his hat. Between the legs, with his back turns, went through 2 sets of skates, and then went through Ilya Samsonov's 5-hole to give the Wilds to cut it to a 7-4 deficit. So Duhaime, I think, as well would benefit from a couple of double shifts. But I think the point that is being made by having Kaprizov get additional time to try to get him going with those top two lines is to not break up the third and the fourth line, which through the 2 games so far this season have looked good. The Rossi line, which is one that I think we were all kind of wondering what the heck that was going to look like as the season started, has generated a ton of chances through 2 games. Rossi nearly scoring 2 goals against Toronto. He had one waved off the board against the Florida Panthers. And so that line is continuing to generate some great chances. And the fourth line as well, Duhaime, and Maroon, they have had some good offensive production as well. Even though they have just the 1 goal to show for it, they have generated a ton of chances as well through that fourth line. So I can understand the rationale of not wanting to mess with the mojo of those 2 lines, but honestly, if you end up giving extra ice time to, at this point, Kirill Kaprizov, to Brandon Duhaime, to Marco Rossi, it's going to lead to probably some additional winning plays that could factor in to a, the winning plays. The cycle goes, the winning plays lead to more shots, lead to more puck possession, and all of that builds to potentially leading to more goals. So if those guys can win additional puck battles for Joel Eriksson Ek and Marcus Johansson, that certainly might be worth taking a look at. But in reality, Joel Eriksson Ek is plenty good at winning those battles along the boards. And what this line is going to be missing is the Boldy shot and the Boldy creativity while he has the puck. And, well, Kirill has plenty of that in his own right. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game unfolds, how much of the extra shifting falls on Kirill Kaprizov alone, and how much of it is added to other players' workloads throughout the course of the game. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll report on it after the game as well, and we'll see how things play out here in this game against the Canadiens tonight. We will have a more traditional pregame preview coming up for you for the Canadiens. We'll have keys to the game. We'll have a look at some of the props and some of the lines for this matchup. And obviously Montreal dealing with some big injury news themselves. Kirby Dach looking like he is going to be sidelined for the foreseeable future, if not the rest of the season. So Canadiens also dealing with some injury woes to start the season. But keep an eye out for a more, like I said, more traditional pregame preview coming up for you for tonight's game as well. Now, how the Wilds fill Matt Boldy's shoes in the longer term, well, the answers there are a little more interesting. And so we'll discuss the options as to how to fill Matt Boldy's spot on the roster for however long he's out as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. You can snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, and right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. We saw a little taste of how the Minnesota Vikings will handle the loss of Justin Jefferson. The offense didn't look particularly good, but we saw more targets for TJ Hawkinson, KJ Osborne, and Jordan Addison. So if you're looking for somebody to fill your player prop quota, grab one of those guys in the interim while Jordan Addison is out. Make sure also that you visit fanduel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wilds. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wilds your first listen each and every day. For the everydayers, we've got a pregame preview coming for you later today. Also, we will have live postgame for you, as well as intermission reports and other content throughout the day as well. So make sure you stay tuned to Locked On Wild, both on your favorite podcast platforms and on social media as well. We've got all the graphics on lock on game days. So make sure that you stay tuned so you don't miss out on anything that we have to offer for you here throughout the rest of the day. So filling Matt Boldy's spot in the lineup from a more long-term perspective. Michael Russo did a look at this earlier this week. I'm just going to throw it out there point blank because I know it has been, it's been mentioned in the comments, and I would love to see it. The Wilds can't afford Sammy Walker right now. So what is likely going to happen is you are either going to get Vinny Lettieri, Nick Patan, or Jujhar Khaira as the player that is called up to fill Matt Boldy's spot on the roster. And so that means Dakota Mermis will go back down. The Wild will go with 6 defensemen for now, which means that we will continue to see the combination of both John Merrill and Alex Goligoski. But on the forward side of the equation, let's say it's Jujhar Khaira. He's, I think, more of a third or fourth line guy. And so you put him on the roster, which means you're going to elevate somebody from either the third or the fourth line. And it could be Freddie Gaudreau if you put Khaira as a wing, but then you've got basically 2 Marcus Folignos on either side of Marco Rossi. Personally, what you could do is you could give Marco Rossi an opportunity at wing on that second line, see what he's able to do. You bring up Jujhar Khaira or Vinny Lettieri, you have them fill that spot with Freddie Gaudreau going to center on the third line, and put one of those guys on the wing for that line. That's one way to do it. Now, you could go the Nick Patan route, but again, he is somebody that is suited for lower in the lineup. And so if you're not going to be able to afford somebody like Sammy Walker to just fill that second line spot right off the bat, then you are going to have to get a little creative with it, with what you have at your disposal. Personally, of the two, and Khaira played well in the preseason. He scored a couple of goals. He looked pretty good in doing so. But I think the fact that Lettieri gives you the speed, I think is something that you just bring. You can never have enough speed. And that was painfully evident against the Toronto Maple Leafs. You can never have enough speed in the NHL. And so my vote would be Lettieri, and whether or not he ends up being the one that fills in on that second line directly, I'd say you put him in more of a third line role, give Marco Rossi a little bump, see if he is able to handle a second line role, let Freddie Gaudreau be that third line center, and see how that works. And if it doesn't, I mean, you've got the flexibility to move players around throughout the game. It's the Montreal Canadiens. And I know I'm saying that after the Wild just gave up 7 goals, and it's a Canadiens team that has been playing decently to start the season, but it's still the Montreal Canadiens. And so I feel like you can use this as an experimentation type game to try to get a better grasp as to what is going to work when you play the Los Angeles Kings on Thursday at the XL Energy Center. You can use this as an opportunity to just try to get a better sense of what you can do, what you can't do. And so I would say don't be afraid to just kind of mix things up and see. Now, obviously, you can't, we're not going to see any sort of a call up for this game because the team's in Montreal. But use practice on Wednesday, morning skate on Thursday, just to try to get a sense of whoever it ends up being, where they fit on this roster. But again, to kind of circle back, I think Marco Rossi has played well enough to deserve a little bit of a promotion here early on in the season, just to see if he is able to handle it. And if not, you put him back on that third line role and just start swapping players in to try to fill that spot. That'd be how I would do it. But again, we'll see exactly how Dean Evison does it once the time comes. So that is what we will be watching here this evening. Again, make sure that you check out our pregame preview as we get you set up for tonight's matchup against the Montreal Canadiens. That'll be dropping a little bit later here today with some nuggets and some keys to the game for beating Montreal on the road. But as far as today's episode goes, that will do it. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the course of the week. You can also follow us on social media so you don't miss out on any of those sweet game day graphics either. Either way, we have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.